because we're doing the segment today on diabetes. And before going to Saudi Arabia, and the UAE, I did not realize that diabetes was such a big issue. But then I realized a lot of the indigenous communities, their ancestors lived in times of famine and times of fasting. When they get introduced to westernized diet with a lot of sugar, they develop insulin resistance and diabetes. There's McDonald's everywhere, sodas are everywhere. Like everywhere I went, they would be like, there's really good food. And they're like, what do you want to drink? I said, water. They're like, what? Are you sick? You don't want a Coca-Cola? You don't want a Pepsi-Cola? You don't want some kind of soda? It is something that I feel our society, our planet has to contend with this, because the rates of obesity, diabetes that are happening globally is not sustainable. I'll say in my clinic, 80 to 90% of my patients are getting positive results. Then comes diabetes, then heart disease, then kidney disease, then eye disease, and death.
Hello and welcome back to the Best Life Code with Dr. Rudy. Dr. Rudy, how are you?
I'm doing great, still jet lagged from my amazing trip to Saudi Arabia and Dubai. Man, I had such an amazing time. I'm glad to be back.
Yeah, and we were tracking you through your podcast appearances in Middle East.
Yes. I went there. So I did multiple podcasts. I was part of the Wellness and Longevity Conference, the Xenos Health Summit that they're going to hold every year in Riyadh. It was my first time in that part of the world. I was very impressed. The people, the culture, the technology that they're pushing, how safe it is wherever you're walking. Really, really impressed.
And with you, we also had your podcast go. So we got listeners from Saudi Arabia. And we were on charts in Saudi Arabia too while you were traveling. So
amazing.
You carried your brand there.
And, this is a really good segue because we're doing the segment today on diabetes. And before going to Saudi Arabia, and the UAE, I did not realize that diabetes was such a big issue in that part of the world. They rank almost top globally in insulin resistance diabetes. It's crazy. I didn't know that.
Yeah. Well, let's dive in then. So
yes,
let's start with the big picture. So how serious is the rise in diabetes and insulin resistance globally? And also, what did you observe on your trip to Middle East?
So really interesting. We deal with a lot of diabetes here in the US and also with the Native American tribe that I work with in Florida, high level of insulin resistance, obesity, and diabetes. So I went to the Arab world. I went first to Riyadh, then I went to Dubai, I went to Abu Dhabi. I had no idea that diabetes and insulin resistance was such a problem. And then when I looked at the statistics, there are some parts in that part of the world that 1 in 5 of the inhabitants have diabetes or insulin resistance. 20% can go up, sometimes 23, 25%. So sometimes low 14, anywhere from 14 to 25%. It's among the top globally. And I was surprised. But then I realized a lot of the indigenous communities that their ancestors lived in times of famine and times of fasting, when they get introduced to westernized diet with a lot of sugar, they develop insulin resistance and diabetes. That's the same thing I'm seeing with the Native Americans in Florida. It's the same thing I'm seeing with the indigenous population there in the Arab world. And the numbers are mind-boggling. And what was interesting, when you look at the locals, because they wear the tobe, the long white shirt, you can't see. In Miami, everybody's wearing short and tank tops. So if somebody's overweight, you see that. Whereas there, I looked at most of the people I was seeing, it's not that they were fat, but a lot of them had increased belly fat, that visceral adipose tissue. And you could see it through their shirt. And then what was really surprising to me is their diet. There's McDonald's everywhere, sodas are everywhere. Like everywhere I went, they would be like, there's really good food. And they're like, what do you want to drink? I said, water. They're like, what? Are you sick? You don't want a Coca-Cola? You don't want a Pepsi-Cola? You don't want some kind of soda? This sugar is really, I was very surprised about this. Unfortunately, the US has exported this standard American diet, the high sugar content, to the point that I was very happy to see that in Dubai, they're planning to, in January, they're going to pass some kind of a sugar tax. The higher the sugar content in beverages, the higher the tax will be. So sugar-sweetened sugar-sweetened beverages are going to be taxed higher in Dubai. I think that's an amazing thing. In the UK, when I was there during the summer, they put a sugar tax. I feel like everywhere should have a sugar tax. We should really try to help our population not drink that much sugar because unfortunately we can get addicted. You know, we've talked about this in this podcast many times. This image of the Time magazine in the late 90s when they did an experiment with rats. There was cocaine or sugar available. The rat would go more for the sugar than the cocaine. So, you know, not to compare those two substances, but it is to say that sugar can really light up the reward pathways, the dopamine pathways, and really, it's really hard to come off sugar. And then we know what excess sugar does. Insulin resistance, big belly, increased visceral adipose tissue, then comes diabetes, then heart disease, then kidney disease, then eye disease, then death. So it is a big problem. We're dealing it on a global level, but I was surprised to see that it was such a problem in the Arab.
So now Dubai is introducing this sugar tax. UK already has it. I know that governments are compelled to legislate sugar now. And I guess what's your view? Is like, why are we not able to control as population itself? Is it just like so much our food is out of control? And do you think what can we do in the US? Again, we have talked about this in the past too, but do you see that sugar tax coming to US also pretty soon? Because there have been some big changes happening.
Yeah, yeah, and I'm happy to see those changes happening where we're trying to go into a healthier food source in the US. It's not easy because the lobbying companies, they protect their interest. You know, it's follow the money. But there's no questions, you know, and I think the big question when you talk about a sugar tax, it's about personal choice. Let people decide whatever they want. But people are not playing on an even playing field when it comes to sugar. We get addicted to sugar. The more sugar you drink or eat, the more you want. So when it becomes personal choice or free will, it's hard to ask somebody who's addicted to a substance to cut down. So I see, you know, in the US or in Dubai, I see that there are campaigns saying, you know, limit the amount of sugar that you drink. But when you're addicted, those drinks taste good. I've really been able to, I barely drink soda now. Barely. I used to drink a lot of sodas. The more you drink it, the more you want it. So now I'm a water drinker. I've got used, my palate got used to this, but it take a good amount of time. In my house, we did this. My kids, same thing. We don't have soda in the house. Yeah, once you go in the house, once in a while, I'll drink soda. You know, it's impossible to avoid. But a lot of places in the US, that Native American tribe that I work, in Dubai, I saw that. Every meal, it's soda. It's some kind of fizz, some kind of pop. It is something that I feel our society, our planet has to contend with this because the rates of obesity, diabetes that are happening globally is not sustainable.
Yeah. And and I don't know if it's the same problem. It's about to be an explosion even in India, South Asia.
Yes, yes, I know that.
It's the
And the
same.
risk, yeah, same
Yeah.
thing. And the risk of heart disease are very high in Indians, Pakistanis, South Asians. But there has to be, it's not just that some populations have a genetic predisposition, but when you put that horrible type of diet, you increase the incidence so much more. So that's why cardiovascular disease is the number one killer all over the world, because it comes from insulin resistance, from bad eating, from diabetes. And again, I did a post this week where I said that exactly that insulin resistance diabetes, the root cause is our food choices. And somebody responded, "Oh, you're so wrong. It's genetics." I'm like, genetics play a very small part in obesity, very small part, right? Because even if you have a family history of diabetes, you grow up in an environment where sugar is not available or you eat very well, you're most likely not going to develop diabetes. There's a few cases of what is called monogenic obesity, where it's one gene that's abnormal, and everybody who has that has obesity. But the reality is 95% of cases or more are not like this. It is you may have a predisposition, but it's the epigenetic changes of your environment, all the bad foods that you eat. Plus, now we put in the endocrine disrupting chemicals, things like microplastics, flame retardants. That also changes your metabolism. Then you add the bad diet, the westernized diet. It's a recipe for disaster.
Yeah. But before we talk about the treatments, walk us through what's actually happening in body, especially with what is insulin resistance, right? In layman terms, and why
Yeah.
it's the root of many modern diseases.
Yeah. So insulin resistance is something that's so important to understand. I'm going to try to paint a little picture. So try to stick with me. The way I like to explain it, when we eat sugar, that's the most ready form of energy that the cell can use. And put to go into the cell, the sugar has to go through a receptor, almost like a key and lock. So picture the cell. You have sugar that you ate is sitting outside the cell, needs to go inside. Insulin is like the key that opens the door to the cell, and the sugar can go inside the cell to give energy to the cell, right? Usually, when you're insulin sensitive, that's a very efficient way of doing it. The sugar comes in, insulin opens the lock, sugar goes inside the cells, everything is good. The more sugar you have, the more that lock doesn't work as well. It's almost like the lock becomes rusted. So now you're eating sugar, you have a lot of sugar hanging outside the cells, the lock is not working or doesn't work well, so it's become resistant, more difficult for the sugar to go inside the cell. So now the sugar stays outside of the cells, and sugar outside of the cells causes so many problems. Increased blood sugar affects our blood vessels, creates problem with our liver, our kidneys, our eyes, our heart. So the more sugar stays outside the cells, the worse it is for us. And then now you have a lot of insulin because the insulin cannot go inside the cells also. High insulin causes the same thing. So now you see that your pancreas has to work extra hard to put out more insulin to try to open those locks. And at some point, your pancreas gives up. That's when you need insulin. So that's why you know what is called type 2 diabetes, because there's type 1 diabetes. Type 1 diabetes, it's an autoimmune disease. For some reason, some people are born with this. It's a genetic or epigenetic disease that some people have since they're young. This you need insulin because it's an autoimmune destruction of your pancreas. Although right now there's a lot of studies showing that with stem cell treatment, we may be able to reverse type 1 diabetes. But type 2 diabetes, it is when you develop so much blood sugar, you have that insulin resistance, so the sugar cannot go inside the cell. So you have high levels of insulin, eventually high levels of blood sugar, then eventually diabetes, cardiovascular disease, kidney disease, eye disease, Alzheimer's dementia, and all of those chronic disease. So insulin resistance is tightly linked to the high sugar consumption. And
And
here's the kicker out of this, because everybody will say, well, the solution to that is easy. Tell people to eat less sugar. If it was that easy, we wouldn't have that problem. Now that person is addicted to sugar because the sugar goes into the brain and lights up the reward pathways, like I said before. So now that person is going through those changes, they're seeing themselves gain weight, gain belly fat, their blood sugar is going up. And then the doctor or everybody tells them, eat less sugar, eat more vegetables. It should be easy. But you're talking to somebody who's addicted. The exact definition of addiction is that you keep doing the same behavior, although you know that it's harming you. So this is in a nutshell what it is. So once that happens, so you're looking at the rates of diabetes 30, 40 years ago, nothing like what we're seeing here. Now you're seeing rates of diabetes and insulin resistance in kids, not only because of the bad foods, but also because of all the endocrine disruptors that are in our system. So it is a perfect storm for development of insulin resistance, obesity, diabetes, and chronic disease.
And does it, and you mentioned a little bit something like this, that in different groups of people, you have found different, benchmarks or numbers, just how the sugar levels are or insulin resistances. Does it vary by what's your ethnicity? Some ethnicities are more prone to. Is that matters or no?
So we're not sure. Again, we're just finding out those things, but we see that some ethnicities are more prone to it. For example, the first time I saw that, it's when I worked with the Native American tribe. Their rates of insulin resistance and diabetes is really high. But when you think about this, their ancestors were very lean. So they lived in a time where if, when they found food, they ate a lot so they can exactly gain their weight, almost like go in hibernation, so that when there was no food, so their body was used to this. Then maybe over the past 50 years or 80 years or 100 years, food become very available. Then high sugar became very available. A lot of those indigenous communities did not used to have a lot of sugar. So their DNA did not evolve to really have that kind of diet. But that's every human is going through this now. Humans, we evolved as hunter gatherers. You kill something, you eat it, then you don't eat for some time. Your body can go through feast and famine. Now we're eating 3 meals, 2 snacks, snacking all the time, high sugar items. Our DNA did not evolve to handle that much sugar. So it's a global problem. We're seeing it everywhere.
Yeah. Again, you have said we are finally seeing a paradigm shift, especially not from just managing the diabetes, but actually reversing it. And that's big, right? So, what makes that possible today?
So now we're going to talk about my favorite subject, GLP-1 medication, because I've been treating diabetes since I was in medical school 30 plus years ago. Our tools that we had were insulin, oral, sulfonylureas, metformin. They were somewhat effective, not great. Insulin, actually, when somebody on type 2 diabetes needs insulin, that means your pancreas has almost stopped working. And insulin actually may increase the risk of heart disease. So it wasn't a great treatment. So, and what did we tell patients when they started getting overweight? You see their belly fats going up, their blood sugars going up, their A1C, they're pre-diabetic. You know, in the clinic, you're like, come on, sir, you need to eat less, you need to exercise, eat less sugar. 6 months later, the person gained weight. And it's a slow progression towards diabetes and eventually heart disease. Now, GLP-1s have completely changed that paradigm because it addresses the root cause of what we were saying. It fixes or it improves insulin resistance significantly. And besides just fixing insulin resistance, it goes to the root cause of our bad habits. Most people taking GLP-1 medication, we've talked about how it can calm the food noise. It can calm the cravings for sugar. So people now eat completely differently on GLP-1. So you go to the real root cause of insulin resistance or type 2 diabetes. It's our bad eating habits that cause insulin resistance, that cause diabetes. So now with GLP-1 medication, and more particularly with tirzepatide, also with semaglutide, we're seeing truly reversal of type 2 diabetes. So before I used to tell my patients, oh, I have bad news for you. You have type 2 diabetes. We're going to start you with metformin. We're going to start you with oral medication. Hopefully we don't need to progress with insulin. Try to eat better. Here's a diet. Here's a way of eating. Please do some exercise. The more muscle you have, the more it can take away your insulin. So all of those things. But really, we have very low success rate. We tell patients that's something you're going to live for the rest of your life. You're going to be on medications the rest of your life. GLP-1 medication over the past 20 years that they've been FDA approved, we're seeing A1C. So hemoglobin A1C is the average blood sugar over 3 months. That's the way we follow what's your diabetes control. Anything below 6.4, anything above 6.4 is diabetes. Anything from 5.6 to 6.4 is pre-diabetes, and the goal is to get below 5.6. And optimally, you want to do about 5.2. So you get somebody, anything above 9 or 10 increases your risk of heart disease, kidney failure, and all those bad things. I've had patients that have had A1C above 10 for years, went on GLP-1 medication, 6 months, they're below 6. 8 months, they're below 8. They may need to stay on the medication long term, but that's okay. I'd rather a patient on the GLP-1 long term than insulin long term because now it keeps their eating habits better, keeps their inflammation low. We've discussed about this in this podcast. GLP-1 medication have been shown to decrease the rate of cardiovascular disease, even cardiovascular death. So now, I've been privileged to work with a very small tribe of Native Americans here, and we were able to there's only maybe less than 700 people in that tribe, about maybe 450 adults. We almost have 50% of the population on GLP-1 medication. And the results we're getting are amazing. Reversal of diabetes, decrease of weight, decrease of obesity, losing belly fat, patients coming off their blood pressure medication, patients coming off their cholesterol medication, patients now feeling a sense of winning. Because a lot of patients, when you have diabetes, you go to the doctor, all they tell you, oh yeah, it's bad again. It's worse than last year. You feel a sense of learned helplessness. Patients feel like, oh my God, I'm such a loser. Look at this. Worse. Whereas you put them on GLP-1 medication, now they start eating less. They're seeing their numbers get better. They're seeing the weight come down. They feel like they're winning. So they have a winning mentality. So what I've seen in that population, and also in my weight loss clinic, patients come back, they're like, Doc, is it time for my blood test yet? Whereas those patients never wanted to do blood tests because they'd rather not see how bad they were doing. So it is empowering to a patient to see that they have control over their eating habits and that they're finally winning that war that they've been hearing all the time. Come on, you can do better.
And would you say that Ozempic, Wegovy, Mounjaro, they're in news everywhere right now? And is it mechanics, like mechanics wise, how are they exactly working? Like what exactly they change? Why is there is such a breakthrough? all of
Yeah.
a sudden?
So GLP-1, actually, we make GLP-1. So when we eat, especially when we take something by mouth, you take some sugar, your body makes GLP-1 so that it can make the insulin goes quicker into the cell. And it also slows down your digestion because once you eat, your body's like, okay, you're eating enough. The higher your GLP-1, the slower your digestion. It gets rid of the insulin. So we make GLP-1. But what happens, as we said, with insulin resistance, it becomes less effective. Actually, fun fact, where the scientists discovered the GLP-1 molecule back in the 1980s, it was in the saliva of a lizard that's in the southwestern of America called the Gila monster. And they found that because the Gila monster sometimes doesn't eat for months. And then they have that. They're like, what is that molecule, that GLP-1? And they tested, they're like, oh, it acts on insulin. That's why in 2005, the FDA, after 20 years since the 80s, they were able to make a formulation that was stable enough. In 2005, the first GLP-1 medication was FDA approved to decrease blood sugar. It's called an incretin hormone that comes from the gut. So very interesting. Every time I say that in a group at a lecture, even doctors are like, what? GLP-1 has been approved since 2005. I thought it's a new medication. I'm like, no, the first GLP-1 called exenatide or Byetta was FDA approved in 2005. I've been using that one in my diabetic population since about 2006 to 2007. And when I used that, I was, wow, look at this patient that's been dealing with a high A1C for years. All of a sudden, his A1C dropped within 4 to 6 months with this new shot. Like there's something to it. The first generation did nothing for weight loss. It was all diabetes. So it's really until another generation of GLP in about 2012 that was called Saxenda started doing some weight loss. Then 2017, when Ozempic, semaglutide came out, that was the breakthrough. So they just refined the molecule because we didn't even know there was GLP-1 receptors in the brain because that's what signals to you, okay, you've eaten enough, and then you can stop eating. So now that we restore healthier GLP-1 levels, that's where patients can win.
There is this perception now, anybody who can have GLP-1s, they have money. So it's almost like when you mention about the Native American, the group that you're working with, it's almost gives you that feeling like, oh, so they got money, that's why they're doing it. So can you dispel this myth that you already said it's already been used for 20 years, and can you also say like how are you getting those medication, and
Yeah,
people.
so that's the tough thing. Inequity is real. Unfortunately, those medications, although they are FDA approved, GLP-1 are FDA approved for diabetes, for obesity, for sleep apnea, so many things. But the insurance in the United States only covers it if you have diabetes, A1C above 6.4. So if you don't have diabetes, not covered by your insurance, you will still benefit from it, but you may have to pay out of pocket. So that's where it becomes very expensive. Although now there's a lot of legislations that's going to decrease the cost. But again, I'm going to quote Elon Musk. We've quoted him before on this podcast, and love him or hate him, the guy's a genius. And he was very open about using GLP-1 to help him lose weight. And I'm going to paraphrase him, but Elon Musk said, nothing would do better to improve the health, longevity, and quality of life for Americans than making GLP-1s very low price to anybody who needs them. Nothing else comes close to this, period. And I've been saying that for years. Our biggest bang for the buck would be to get patients who need it GLP-1 to reduce food cravings, change their consumer behavior, improve insulin resistance, reverse diabetes. You would change the health of a nation if you could do this. So the health inequality is real because those medications are expensive, not covered by insurance, but a lot of progress is happening. Again, GLP-1 medications have only been FDA approved since 2005, although it's longer than what most people think. It's only 20 years. I like to compare GLP-1s to penicillin. In the 1940s, when we invented penicillin, it was needed because infection was killing us. I call GLP-1s the penicillin of our era. And it's only 20 years. So once we come, our scientists continue to improve on the formula, make it maybe more available, oral pills. They're going to combine it with things that can conserve your muscle mass. Where are we going to be 5 years, 10 years, 20 years from now? Now that we see there is a pathway, hormone, a receptor that can really help people change their eating behavior and affect their blood sugar and their insulin resistance significantly. So I'm excited for the future because I think technology is going to be able to help us out of this. And I'm going to say something, I always say it here, right? People are going to say in comments listening to us, people just need to eat better and exercise. That will take it. Eat real foods. You don't think people dealing with this know this? It irks me so much when I hear people say that. If you're lucky as an individual that you've never dealt with weight issues, that you maintain, good for you. But don't pass judgment on people who are in the middle of an addiction of food, of sugar. They're trying to do better, but they can't. And those are the patients I love to help. I love to help everybody. But when I see somebody struggling and I can give him a tool to get him out of that struggle, I even the playing field against those engineered foods that are really making us sick.
Yeah, so important. And, you know, let's go back a little bit on these diet, exercise, and sleep, how they work when someone is doing GLP therapy. Is there something different protocols you have to follow? And because I'm sure there are things that you still have to do.
So, we always talk about the pillars of health. The pillars of health, you can't get away from this. Good nutrition, exercise, especially resistance training, and good sleep. That is always. However, when patients come and see me, they're like, Doc, I know I should eat better. I know I need to go to the gym. But again, they're in the middle of their addiction. I picture it like a downward spiral. When patients are dealing with weight issues, it's almost like they're in the downward spiral. They eat bad, they feel bad about themselves, they're tired, they don't wake up to go to the gym. When they feel bad about themselves, they eat some comfort food, they feel worse about themselves, and then it keeps going in a down spiral. And the patient internalize this, I can't win this, learn helplessness, and it continues going down the spiral. Whereas I can come in and I give him that addiction medication, that's a GLP-1. All of a sudden, the food noise is not as much. The patient loses the first 5 pounds, the first 10 pounds. All of a sudden, instead of a downward spiral, you see a climb up. It's an upward spiral. Now the patient is like, oh my God, I lost the first 10 pounds. I'm not as hungry at night. I don't snack as much. I'm going to go to the gym tomorrow. I'm going to I'm going to do other positive things. So GLP-1 medication, because of their effect on our consumer behavior, eating behavior, and because it causes pretty fast weight loss, you go from a downward spiral of negativity, of feeling bad with self-resentment, into an upward spiral of feeling like, you got this, I'm winning, I'm hopeful. So, Mount Jarrow, I call it Mount Jar Hope. It brings back hope to patients. So it's amazing. I get patients crying in my office all the time because they just thought, okay, I'm never going to lose this weight. I'm never going to get rid of this diabetes. And then you see them gain it. You see them gain that power. It is empowering for the patients and for me, the physician, that's seen that for 20 years. And I'm like, my God, we need to celebrate those medications. Again, they're not perfect. It's not for everybody. There are some side effects. But we've talked about that many times. If you have experience like me, you know how to help patients mitigate that. You'll get most of the benefits, right? It doesn't help 100% of patients, but it's the closest thing that we've ever had. I'll say in my clinic, I'll say 80 to 90% of my patients are getting positive results. And, we start low with the dosing. We slowly increase. I tend to microdose. I'm big on nutrition education, behavior modification. And nutrition is not complicated at the end of the day. There's nothing different when you take GLP-1. The only thing I tell patients to make sure to take enough protein, make sure they meet their protein requirements so they can maintain their muscle mass. Tell them to avoid fried foods, overly sweetened foods, because you don't digest it as well. You'll feel sicker. Drink a lot of hot liquids, hot tea, hot soups. Patient needs to digest that a little better. And make sure you do resistance training so that you don't lose too much muscle mass. But that's a big criticism of those medications. That's true. It can happen. We've seen the look. Patients who've taken GLP-1 didn't do what they were supposed to, lost a lot of weight, but you see a lot of muscle mass. From day one, I tell my patient, make sure you don't just go walking. You exercise, you get enough protein. And you know what I see with my patients a lot? In the beginning, they can't even see themselves going for a walk. But they lose the first 10 pounds. Now they go for a walk. They lose 20, 30 pounds. They're like, you know what? Maybe I'm going to start resistance training. Again, you meet patients where they're at. You don't force it on them. But when they start winning, that positive psychology will translate into better results. And then now it becomes a partnership. I love what I do because I see patients going from non-compliant, from non-motivated to completely self-motivated, wanting to do better because we restore their hormonal integrity.
And I I've heard this rebuttal from a lot of people that, well, if you lose mass and for that reason, that is again, now you're increasing your risk of mortality. What is the truth there?
Yeah, so lean muscle mass, we always talk about this, right? Muscle is, we call it the organ of longevity. Actually, a lot of studies are showing that your muscle strength, your grip strength, or your muscle mass determines your how early you're gonna die. You become frail, you have more inflammation. So fat, as we get older, this is what happens. I call it the double whammy of aging. You get increased visceral fat, increased belly fat, so more inflammation, and you get decreased muscle. Muscle is a sink for inflammation and sugar. So you get that double whammy, increased fat, decreased muscle. We want to reverse that. So unfortunately with GLP-1, they are so effective at losing weight that you will lose some muscle with it also. But the way you mitigate that is exactly what we said. Eating enough protein, doing resistance, heavy training, not just going walking with a vest. Those are good. But I encourage my patient, you also need to do strenuous type of exercise. Build yourself to it. And then we've talked about this. My combination of GLP-1 plus testosterone therapy, closest thing to a fountain of youth we've ever had, because you can reverse that double whammy of aging. You can, instead of having low muscle mass and high visceral fat, you can reverse that with that combination. You decrease visceral fat, increase lean muscle mass. This is the best recipe for good aging, maintain metabolic health, and to decrease your risk of chronic disease.
Now, November 14 marks the International Diabetes Day, and you are so much into this every day with your patients and where the direction is heading, even with your work that you're doing to keep up with everything. Where do
Mhm.
you see diabetes care heading in next 5 to 10 years?
Well, if we really do like Elon Musk said, to make those medications super cheap, super low cost, and I don't believe it should be for free. Because one thing I noticed in my clinic, when people pay their money, their behavior is different. So you make it very low cost because there has to be skin in the game. But what I see for diabetes in the future, that there's going to be more and more medication that address the real root cause of what we're seeing, not just insulin resistance, but our addiction to the engineered foods that are killing us. I call the standard American diet a weapon of mass destruction. It's killing us, and we've exported that to many countries. So, what we need to do is change our relationship to food. We need to go back to healthy eating. But it's easier said than done when the population is addicted to sugar. We need to give them the right tools to fight that addiction, reverse their insulin resistance, and really help make a dent in the epidemic of chronic disease that we're seeing, not only in the US, but globally.
Okay. And any last message from your side, especially for Diabetes Day?
Yeah, so for Diabetes Day, first, I need everybody to know. First, again, we always say, check your numbers. What's your blood sugar, your fasting blood sugar? What's your fasting insulin level? Because the example I gave with the lock and key, sometimes your blood sugar is fine. It's your insulin level that's high. So you want to check your fasting blood sugar, fasting insulin level, and also your hemoglobin A1C. That's the average blood sugar over 3 months. Everybody should know those numbers on a yearly basis. And if you see any abnormalities, you need to start taking this position. And when you're doing this, realize that something, if you see you can't change your behavior, ask yourself, I may be addicted to sugar. I can't kick the habit. I need help. So it should be, we're all here about empowering people. You don't just let your doctor make the decision. If you see you can't change your behavior, try, everything. And GLP-1 may be a really good tool for you to help you go there. So I want everybody listening to this. If you or somebody you love has diabetes or prediabetes, to me it's an emergency. It's the beginning of the end because diabetes causes all of those chronic diseases. So take action, do your research, and maybe GLP-1 may be one of the effective tools that can help you reverse diabetes. We need to start thinking about diabetes as a lifestyle disease that's reversible, not as a chronic disease.
And what's your message to, or I guess, word of caution for young parents like me who have toddlers? And it's very hard to keep them away from everything. We just had
Yeah,
Halloween. So
yeah.
much of our culture is built around just
Around
sugar.
sugar, around bad eating. It's hard. My kids, in the beginning, I tried, but it's part of our culture. It's tough. It's tough. It's you try the best that you can. Again, me, I've been lucky, as I said. I've never developed that bad taste and addiction to sugar. So I've maintained my weight well my whole life. I've always worked out also. But it is an epidemic. It is. So the more you can avoid sugar for your kids, try to do this. But it's not easy. It's not easy. But the best thing you can do is limit added sugar to your foods. You look at coffee. Coffee has become now one of the places where people take the most sugar, besides soda, right? Starbucks, easy. Everybody goes to get a Starbucks, double pump of this, spice this, vanilla this. It adds up quickly. Sometimes when I counsel patients, I'm like, okay, you're not losing weight. They're like, I'm eating well, doc. Here's what I eat. Then I'm like, let's see what you're drinking in the morning. You're drinking a coffee, whatever, macchiato with double pump this. There's almost 80 grams of sugar. You're like, whoa, would you ever take a drink and you put 8 tablespoons, 8 teaspoons of sugar? You'd never do this. That's what you're drinking sometimes in your sodas, in your coffee. So people need to start really understanding that sugar is added to our food. Each individual, again, empowerment, self-empowerment, needs to know how much sugar am I consuming in a day? Am I overdoing it? And what can I do to start decreasing that amount? Imagine a world where each person would decrease their sugar intake by 25%.
I have long discussions with few of the friends who are trying to see how can we show the kids. Even as a parent, sometimes you just don't,
Yeah.
right? So one of the things that we started to think is like maybe, yes, we cannot control the food chain, but maybe we can change the, education on that by actually showing a visual on each product that you buy compares a shake. I mean, I don't know what's the best solution.
No, yeah, listen, my girls just finished high school. One of them, and a lot of times they do those kind of projects that they put different drinks and they put next to it the amount of sugar that's in it. And every time I see those, it's mind boggling because you look at a little can of soda like this and you see 6 tablespoons of sugar. When you see it, it's powerful. But when you drink it, you don't even realize. Some people I know drink 4 to 6 sodas a day, 2 to 3 sodas a day. There's so much sugar hidden in almost everything. And the USA is the worst with the high fructose corn syrup, all of those things. And when you drink sugar, it's the worst thing. Because when you drink the sugar, there's no fiber in it to slow down your digestion or slow down the insulin release. So drinking added sugar is the worst thing. You get a spike of insulin, spike of blood sugar, completely correlated to insulin resistance and to diabetes. But again, it's easy to tell somebody you drink eating too much sugar until we realize that maybe it's an addiction. When I talk to my patients, they don't like that word addiction. They're like, no, I'm not addicted, doc. What are you talking about? I can stop it. I'm like, can you stop it consistently for a year? Yeah, you can stop it for 2 weeks, 4 weeks, 2 months, but it comes back. That's the definition of addiction. It comes back and you go back into the behavior that's hurting your health. GLP-1s have been the best thing so far to reverse that addiction, reverse insulin resistance, and reverse diabetes.
Here you go, folks. I know we want to celebrate that day, November 14th, but at the same time, we want to bring what's the real state. So I hate to say that we want to use this episode as a warning for where we are headed, where we are. Everyone needs to make a difference. It applies to me as well. I am also still drinking or eating foods that has so much sugar.
Mm-hmm.
But I know one thing that at least at this moment, I have this capability to just shut sugar off, but I don't think my kids have it. And
Yeah.
and that fears me a lot because I don't know what's going to happen, right? Like, so this is everyone's, I guess, fears with the sugar and how our food chain is. So Dr. Rudy, once again, thanks for enlightening.
But hold on, Vivek, because I never like to leave the podcast on a negative note. This is not about fear mongering. This is not about, yes, it's a warning, but it's also a hopeful message that we can break free from that addiction. Again, I always say I have a love hate relationship with GLP-1 medications. I love how powerful they are into reversing insulin resistance and diabetes, but I hate that I have to use such a tool. I wish people could just eat less sugar and exercise and everything is okay. So for me, it is, I have that duality of, man, those tools are amazing. But I'm like, I can't believe I have to use this for people to finally eat less sugar. So we want to finish this with a hopeful note. First, it starts with awareness. Know how much you're taking. Love yourself that whole time. Start to make some changes. Test your blood to see how much insulin resistance you have. Take action, find the right medical partner and your right tribe that's going to help you. Retest, fine tune, and don't be ashamed or don't be scared to use GLP-1 if you need to.
All right, folks. So, on a positive note, this is again, everything is treatable and reversible. And
everything is figure outable.
Exactly. So let's take the responsibility, like we say it in the show a lot, start with you first. And then how Dr. Rudy recommended, we need to follow the steps. And definitely there's a path. So let's not think that it's all doom and gloom. That's what it is.
Exactly. Always on the positive side.
All right. Sounds good. Well, this is the Best Life Code. We will be back next time. Thank you so much.